Hello, people of God in our Wausau parishes, and welcome to this week's Quick Things, another great conversation. First, a few announcements. This is the crunch week for donations to our Advent collection for Eastside parishes. The items that are being collected are in the Quick Things email as well as in the bulletin, and they are needed in the gathering space at either St. Michael's or Resurrection by this weekend. So you can bring stuff along to Mass, and the stuff that's being collected is listed in the worship aid. Again, as I've said, my goal is not that everyone contribute a lot, but that more of us might contribute something. So if you can bring something that's on that list and contribute to this Advent project, please do so. The Advent Giving Project at St. Anne continues through Advent and Christmas time, and we'll talk more about that next week. Also, we have 3 nights of the Sacrament of Reconciliation coming up next week. Father Al and I will be at, let me find it here. We will be at St. Anne's on Tuesday night, December 17th from 5 to 6, at St. Michael, December 18th from 5 to 6, and Resurrection, December 19th from 5 to 6. I shouldn't say we'll both be there. One of us will be at those places. St. Anne on Tuesday, St. Michael on Wednesday, and Resurrection on Thursday. And then, of course, Saturday at 9 o'clock at St. Anne, and Saturday at 3 o'clock at St. Michael. And today, if you're getting this on Wednesday, December 11th, the day that this is put in the email, is the 25th anniversary of Deacon Peter Burrick's ordination as a deacon back in the day. I was there. I don't remember it, but I know I was there because I had done homiletics with those deacon candidates. I don't know if they turned out to be, Deacon Peter's a pretty decent preacher, but I don't think it has anything at all to do with me. So we wish congratulations and gratitude for Deacon Peter's generous service to our parishes and to the greater church as well. With me on Quick Things this week is Sister Judy Kramer. She's a Benedictine sister at the monastery of St. Benedict in St. Joseph, Minnesota, near St. Cloud, near Collegeville and St. John's Abbey. But the Sisters of St. Benedict are a community unto themselves. You were established after the monastery, correct, Judy?
Yes, we were established in 1948 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
And what about the Sisters at St. Joseph? When was that established?
1850 something.
So a few years, but not long after the Abbey was established.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And then, yes, correct. So you were part of the community of Benedictine Sisters at St. Bede in Eau Claire. And you're so Sister Judy is as I said, a Benedictine sister. We have known each other for like 35 years, Judy. Can you believe that?
I think so, yeah. I guess we might as well.
And so tell us so before we get into our topic today, just tell a little bit about the story of St. Bede and now returning to their origins at St. Joseph.
Well, it was part of the plan of the sisters to be able to be papal, that means under Rome and not under the bishops. There was great controversy, for example, that the sisters here at St. Joseph should work only in the Stearns County area in schools. And there was an urgent request and need that the sisters go to other places, including to foreign countries, Japan, China, places like that. And so they had to have more than one house to be able to form a federation or a congregation. So no one helped them, so the sisters did that on their own. We now have several sisters who are canon lawyers, and that helps things along. But there was great concern to not be dictated to by St. John's Abbot or by a local bishop. So that was part of the struggle of the liberation of women religious. So that happened in, I would say the early 1950s. So there was a foundation then in Bismarck, North Dakota. There was one in Washington State. There was already a large house in Duluth that joined this group. So we ended up with about 7 houses. And then with time, each of the houses in the Orient, both Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, China and Japan became independent monasteries, so they would each have a voice. So that made us large enough and fit into the plan so that we became a federation. And we did need other men's okay for us to be doing what we did. And Eau Claire was one of those areas. We founded in 48. St. Paul's Monastery was a day after us in St. Paul, Minnesota. So much of the things, so we moved down there and, just did what people wanted to do. I'm sorry, that's when I'm going to take it off the hook.
And so the sisters from St. Bede's served in places throughout the diocese. We had sisters from St. Bede's here in Wausau. You were a teacher, but you served in diocesan offices, and others did as well. So we were grateful for the presence of the sisters, the Benedictine sisters who.
And I went to Chile for 7 years and lived there as well. And yeah. I'm not sure there would have been permission from the diocese, but there was the plea at that time from Pope Paul VI saying, would each religious community of men and of women send 10% of their members to someplace in Latin America? And we were a very small community. So Sister Clarita Sells went and joined the sisters from Duluth, which would have been our federation. And then 3 years later, I went to Chile. I was there for 7 years.
And would you say that that's what really gave you a foundation in terms of what we're going to talk about today, an appreciation of that culture or of a different culture beyond our own? That's where you learned to speak Spanish, I presume. Was that time in Chile or preparing to go to Chile?
And I was only in Mexico once for the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I was in language school at the time, and we did go out to Guadalupe. But I think that was the night I made there were a group of seminarians there, and I don't know what I said, something about we in North America. I didn't know how to say we whites. I didn't want to say. And this young man said to me, check your map. Mexico is also part of North America. So be careful. And another distinction.
See, it is. Yeah.
It's very important just not to call Spanish-speaking peoples Hispanic, because Hispanic means from the peninsula in Europe. And the Spanish-speaking country in the New World, in the Americas, it's more correct to say Latinos, because we talk about Latin America, Central America, that sort of thing. So I had to learn that the hard way.
And that makes sense. That would be what we understand as Latin America, Latino. I will try to remember that. So we are here to talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe. So a nice segue there from your experience that day in Mexico. On December 12th is the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It is on the calendar. It's celebrated in our parishes every year. But often not by many of our people. So it's not something that we have a cultural appreciation of. We have religious appreciation, but again, that doesn't extend far beyond the small group of people who come to morning mass for the most part. But as you have experienced, and now as you minister to Latino communities of Catholics and other Christians in central Minnesota, it's a huge deal among them, correct?
One of the things that I think turns off those of us from this part of the United States is somehow or another the Latino people feel they need to take some gift to the Virgin. So there will be dozens and dozens of roses at the parish, and it will always start with Mass. I give them credit. There might be room for silent adoration and that sort of thing, but there's no celebration of Guadalupe without a Mass. But there people who are very poor arrive with armfuls of roses. But what happens in the city of Mexico, many people in their pilgrimage, just as Father Tom did a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, many people arrive from blocks away, crawling on their knees, so that we're kind of turned off by the blood and the fact. But the idea, they want to bring something, so they bring a sacrifice to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I think since the great concern and focus on immigrants that we have, the whole cult of Mary of Guadalupe has become much, much stronger, because the realization that the Holy Family, Mary and Jesus and Joseph, were immigrants, and they had to flee to Egypt so that they would be safe after. And we're not too sure. I mean, we knew there was a King Herod. We knew the things about that, but they did have to flee. And when I was in the Holy Land, when we went to Egypt, the first thing they do is to take you to a Catholic church in Egypt, in just shortly off where you get off, and they say, this is where Mary and Joseph and Jesus lived, and this is where we went to teach them how to speak our language. So the ability to understand that kind of thing is strong. Yes. What else shall I
On
add?
my wall over here, Judy, is an icon of the Holy Family fleeing to Egypt, which I purchased at a monastery in Cairo on the trip with Catholic Relief Services in 1993 that you initiated my participation in. So I know of the devotion there in Egypt to the Holy Family, and they're fleeing to Egypt. So getting more focused now on Our Lady of Guadalupe, can you tell us a little bit of the story? It's 1531. What happened?
Okay, there were native peoples in Mexico by the thousands, and that's why today in celebrations in the parish that I work in, we start mass with people coming in. I was shocked with American kind of Indian headdress on, doing a dance. They actually do a dance, and there's someone with a good drum beat. It's kind of a simple step, but there's usually about 12 or 15 people at least that come in full headdress of what we would call Indians. We aren't sure what the Indians dressed like down there, but we do
Right.
know that they also used feather, not as much leather as there would have been here in the Central Plains area. But the idea that for years the people had lived, they had some very highly intelligent sophistications in math and science and astronomy, astrology, and all that. But they were pagan peoples according to the Europeans. So the European armies came in from Spain, from Portugal, and slaughtered thousands and thousands of these native peoples. And behind them came the Franciscan missionaries, immediately baptizing them and converting them into the faith, whether they were ready for that, whether they were prepared for that or not. But from what I have read, Juan Diego, the poor Indians to whom Mary appeared, was a Christian. And I've read a couple of the stories. This is a pretty good picture of Juan Diego. From what I've read in this book, Juan Diego was about 52, 54 years old. He had been married, and he and his wife were both Christians, but they had no children. So Juan Diego moved in with his uncle, Bernardino, who was not in good health. So he was kind of helped take care of him. But the interesting thing is that the Christianity was pushed upon these people. So if they accepted it in their hearts, they had to indeed be very brave people, because their culture would not have supported Christianity. They would have had many gods. The sun, the moon, close to nature would have been very, very strong to their culture. So the story,
the Aztec culture, correct?
yes,
The Aztec
yes.
culture.
So what comes in here, very important, is that when Mary appears to Juan Diego, he's on his way to Mass. And the books that I've read here said, and further instruction. He had been baptized. So this is a plug for continuing education, Mr. Pastor. Okay, so he was on his way to Mass. And according to this book that I have, was by William Story, this was an old book, but this is a novena that was put together that is not part of the culture, but to our culture, that's something that carries on. But this mysterious woman, very near what would have been the garbage dump of Mexico City, appeared to him, and in very loving language kept calling him my son, my little one, that sort of thing. And her message was that she wanted some kind of a chapel built right where she was. And she said, you will be my emissary. You are to go to the bishop in Mexico City and tell him of my wish. Well, you probably know the story that he was treated very rudely every time he went to the bishop's house. The porter would hardly let him in. They thought he was a poor beggar. And even when the bishop saw him,
Imagine the courage he would have had to have just to go to see the bishop,
this poor papa.
Yeah.
And probably the bishop spoke Spanish, and Juan Diego's Spanish would have been halting. But he did get the message across. Well, the bishop laughed at him. No, why would you had this apparition, and out there next to the dump, she wants, I have enough things. Well, actually, it says there were 4 of these apparitions. The next day, Juan Diego tried to go, the next time he went to Mass, he tried to go by another route. And Mary followed him there and talked to him with the same message, with very endearing language, calling him and saying not to worry, but take my message to the bishop. I went to chapel out here in my name. And each time he was rebuffed, made to wait hours and hours. And the one was made to wait until evening. And the porter and so forth became very upset that Juan Diego be turned back, and they said no, they went for it. And finally, Juan Diego said, when this, and he just kept telling her this beautiful virgin that came to him. And the interesting thing is, she spoke his language. She spoke the Indian language. She was dressed as their native peoples would be.
And she was the color of his skin.
Right. And she had a black sash around her waist, which was their sign for a pregnant woman. So she was willing to say she was pregnant, though not married. And this would have been a disgrace in the Indian culture, and it certainly was a disgrace in the Christian culture. So we know the rest of the story, that finally Juan Diego said, would there be a sign, a symbol that I could convince the bishop? So Mary told him it's December 12th, when it is also cold in Mexico, cold enough to freeze water to ice. I have seen that and felt it. But she said, go to the upper plains in the mountain here and pick the roses. Well, even the roses are named in here, the gorgeous kind from Europe. And Juan Diego, this message that I read said that she rearranged the roses in his tilma, so that they would be. So he went on down to the bishop's house for a fourth time, and he had something in his cloak, which was something that was intriguing to the porter. But he had to wait all day long, all afternoon, till the bishop came. And it said the porter was more intrigued about what was inside his capa, so that his tilma, that he would say to the bishop, you better come and see this man. So the story is that Juan Diego repeated the request of the Virgin Mary and opened his tilma, and the roses fell to the floor, as well as the beautiful picture of Mary that to this day exists in Distrito Federal in Mexico City. Mexico City is at the top of an extinct volcano. So if you ever fly out of Mexican City, you probably will duck, because they have to move rapidly upward to get away from the corners of the extinct volcano that are there. So that's where she wanted. And actually, there are now 4. There was just kind of a hut that was built to start with in honor of Mary. Then there was a small little building that was condemned eventually because they thought the walls. Then there was a good size church built, and then a huge cathedral built. Which Pope Paul that visited? There was a pope that visited there, so they had a magnificent.
I think John Paul II visited there too.
Okay, that could be it.
Yeah.
So that
this is in Mexico City, Judy, or at Guadalupe?
Guadalupe is just a little ways outside of Mexico City. It's like it has been. I mean, you've been there. There are many places.
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Well, there are many places where there are trinkets and things like that. You can get mementos. But it is a place of devotion. And they tell me
the tilma continues to be displayed with this depiction of Our Lady of Guadalupe, correct?
Right. And they have looked at the fabric, and it is genuine, the hemp that would have been of that age. And they cannot explain how it maintains its color.
Right. Why it hasn't fallen apart. It should have disintegrated over these hundreds of years.
And very poor material.
And just to put this in historical context, so this is 1531, well before the apparitions that are much more common to us, such as Fatima or Lourdes or Champion near Green Bay, which were in the 1800s or even 1900s. So this is in the 1500s.
Mm-hmm. Very early. So she's the patron of the Americas, plural. And so that, and then I think and someone has written how if she chose the center of the North and South and Central, there was a reason for that.
And so what's the significance to the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe appearing to Juan Diego? What's the significance of that to the Latino people, or even to us who are not Latino?
Well, I think it was dignity to women. And he never gave her a name, and she never gave her a name, except saying that she was from heaven and that she was the mother of Christ. She was the mother of the Lord. And this book talks a great deal about Theotokos, which is the idea, the term that has been given often, the mother of God, which doesn't mention, unfortunately, Joseph, nor family life. So that's kind of that a woman stood alone here with the message to a poor kind of forgotten man who was a widower and living with his uncle. And at one point, his he's worried about getting back to his uncle, and Mary says, "Don't worry, my dear one, don't worry, he'll be all right." And he was cured at that time and then lived several years after that. But I think the dignity given to women, and that a woman, an unmarried woman, would bring this message. She wanted a place where people would pray. And the message is not worship me, but pray with me. So people often go, and the Latinos are very aware of this. They would be very, very hesitant to go themselves to any important ruler. But Mary, if you go with me, I would go. And that was kind of the message of Juan Diego. So I think the idea of the patroness going with the people is very important. But recently, the whole thing of immigration throughout the world, and it's not just in North America, throughout, and who is it? Germany and England have closed their borders. They have thousands of people that wish to immigrate to their countries too. But here we sit from our perch of pleasure and of prosperity, and look down and refuse to accept or throw them out. I was upset when current President-elect someone said, "You would dare then to separate families." Well, he said I'd send the whole family away, not just the undocumented member, just the whole thing. But the disregard for family connections, I think, is dreadful in our day and age. So I think Guadalupe has taken on a whole new meaning, particularly with the idea of immigrants. And we have to look carefully at that.
I've always thought there was a tremendous message of empowerment, of confronting injustice in her witness as well, her appearance to Juan Diego for Latino people who, at that time especially, they were being persecuted. There have often been tyrants throughout Central and South America who held power over their people in various ways, and that the legend or the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe is one of empowerment for those people, that there's a sense of liberation that comes from her, her witness, her appearance.
The other thing that currently pleases me very much, I think this has caused all of us, from whatever ethnic background we're from, to look into our own background. What did our foreparents live through to come here? Why did some of them immigrate? And that many people are more connected with that. And I think that's healthy, that we haven't always, been well-to-do and been connected with everything. They went through great hardships as well. And the music, the culture, the food, that sort of thing, plays heavily in Our Lady at the parish.
Well, so let's talk about that. So this will be given to our parishioners, sent to our parishioners on Wednesday, December 11th. December 12th is the feast. What will happen? So you serve it. You minister in parishes with Spanish-speaking, or you minister to Spanish-speaking communities. What will happen there on this feast?
Well, they have spent, I'm sure, $2,000 already to hire a mariachi band from the Twin Cities to come in. And they will come with their big hats, their cowboy boots, and their whole 2 or 3 guitars, a bass guitar, a couple of soprano guitar, always accordion as well. Sometimes maracas, that sort of thing.
Trumpets.
Yes, and that will play the parts of the Mass. So all throughout the Mass, the very loud mariachi band is there. So they begin with, and then there's a huge meal. And in my parish, they invite the blancos, the white people. They invite them free of charge to come in, and there'll be beans and rice and beans and their foods. But there will also be cake and pie and the kinds of dessert that our people here in North America would enjoy. But they invite them if they want them to come in. And then afterwards, there's often dancing, but it always starts with Mass. There is not private kind of, I'm surprised they haven't moved into kind of a holy hour, but a holy hour prays directly to Jesus, to God, to the Sacred Heart. And this was not the message, pray to me. No, I will go with you, is the message from the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Well, Judy, holy hours would be other days, not on the feast day, because we have other, as you've indicated, there are lots of other feasting that needs to occur. I first experienced this feast when I was in the seminary because we had a lot of seminarians from Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador.
Guatemala is a biggie.
We didn't have any from Guatemala, but correct. I mean, I've known that from my time in Guatemala visiting folks there. You can see the images, so you know it's something that's part of their story. And this was always a big deal at the seminary. You know, we would have mass in Spanish, and then we would have Mexican food. We would not have food for the rest of us because, well, I mean, we all like Mexican food anyway, right? Most of us. Yeah.
I think that's a time to be invited to taste it, at least.
Well, Bishop Neary, probably in your area, Bishop Neary will maybe have mass at a parish somewhere.
There are at least 8 parishes in the St. Cloud Diocese where there are reasonable amounts of, and I think he simply rotates and he goes to. He has not been to Rockville, the parish where I work. But he did say, I prepare students that prefer to be prepared in Spanish for confirmation. And he'll send word, have those students at the end so I can do the ritual in Spanish and speak. He loves to use his Spanish. Thankfully, our bishop.
He's a fine guy. I met him last April when I was up at St. John's. He's really
he is.
Very approachable and engaging. Oh shoot, what was I going to say about the feast?
The other thing I would say is that this is the beginning of the Christmas season. No, we can't wait. They get presents already, and then shortly after Guadalupe is Las Posadas, where they have this that they act out. Knock, knock, knock. Goes Joseph. Can we stay here? No, we don't have room. And then finally, knock, 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 what they say. Then they come in with boxes of presents. All the kids get a present. That's Las Posadas. And the piñata was born with Las Posadas. So that is something that's caught on very well here too. So that they have all.
Advent includes lots of cultural adventures.
But that's the beginning of it. And then with the visit of the 3 kings, there's always a cake. And there's a white bean that's someplace in the cake. And if you get the piece of cake with the white bean, you have to own up to it. Then you are responsible for the snacks for the next time there's a meeting of this group. That's your job. And you can't be careful that you don't swallow the white bean.
When I was in Guatemala one year on the Feast of the Epiphany, they did a La Posadas kind of thing, going from door to door. The wise men went from door to door.
Okay.
Of some kind. I don't remember the detail of it, but it was like a parade of sorts, and they went from house to house. Maybe they were looking for the baby Jesus.
That could be.
I don't remember the details of what was all happening.
Well, a custom when I was in Chile those 7 years is that there, and nobody else seems to know, but in Chile they burn the old year on the 31st of December. The neighborhood will get together and they make a dummy with straw, and then they put a coat on it and pants, and then they somehow get it on the rope, the highest tree or whatever they can get, and then at midnight they light it on fire so that you burn the old year and you start fresh for a new year, and then you celebrate the rest of the night. You go to everybody's house for a drink and something to eat and move on.
Some music. And,
yes. But each country has their own customs, and in Chile they didn't celebrate Guadalupe much at all. It was mentioned, but nothing. Each country has their own. Chile's Virgin Mother is Our Lady of Mercy, La Merced, which would be. So I'm sure each country has their own.
Sure. Which makes sense. I mean, Chile is far further from Mexico City than we are.
Oh, sure.
They share a language, but the ancient languages would have been different among those and stuff too.
And Mexico has officially 23 languages are spoken there. If even the higher mountains, each area, they have developed their own dialect, and they might not even understand each other, which is, extremely important and hard for us to understand. Of course, I have a hard time with people that talk English as a second language. Most of these people, English is a third or fourth language because they have had a native language in their mountain village, and then once they start school, they learn Spanish. And then when they come here, the first thing they do is learn English. So oftentimes it's ELL, English Language Learner, and not English as a second language,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
more than that.
Well, we forget that. I mean, for example, when Blessed Stanley Rother went to Guatemala, he had learned Spanish before he went, but once he got there, the people in his village, Santiago Adelan, they didn't speak Spanish, so he had to learn their language, and then he translated the gospel for the first time into the language of the people of that village.
Imagine that, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention in central Wisconsin, it's most of us are unaware of this because it's not part of our experience, but there is a Catholic presence, a Catholic outreach to people who speak Spanish, a Latino community. They have Mass in Spanish at St. Matthew's every Sunday, I think at noon. St. Bronislava in Plover has Mass in Spanish on Sunday afternoons. And I think St. Bernard's in Abbotsford has Mass in Spanish as well. And then in other parts of the diocese as well, but those are the ones I know of here in central Wisconsin. So I don't, to be honest, well, who might have be critical of this? I don't think we've reached out to our Spanish speaking communities as we do, but of course I haven't learned Spanish either. So I have to be fairly quiet in my comments on that question.
But the Spanish speaking understand that it's difficult, and there are many ways to communicate. Tone of voice and even body posture are very important. And that
Judy, I once celebrated Mass in Spanish in Guatemala.
Okay.
The priest who was there from the United States, but who had been there for 27 years or something, he discovered that he had scheduled 2 weddings on the same afternoon, and one of which would prevent him from being at the Saturday night Mass in the village. So he comes to me and he didn't ask. He just said, I need you to celebrate Mass, blah, blah. Someone will come and get you. They'll take you there. And I mumbled my way. I mean, I can say many of the words somewhat correctly. So, and the people, of course, as you will know, the people couldn't have been more gracious or grateful for me being there, even though who knows how terribly I messed up the language. But I've always said, I wish we could be as patient of
Yes.
international priests, for example, who struggle with our language or to speak English the way we speak English, and to be as grateful as those folks were that night in San Lucas Tolomon. Oh my gosh. But anyway. So Judy, I want to thank you for sharing a bit of the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and thank you for your many years of ministry to our church in La Crosse and now in St. Cloud in that area. You're such a great person for me to know personally, to claim as a friend and as a minister of the church. I did want to say one thing though, when we celebrate Mass on the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, it's always irked me that the gospel isn't what I think it should be. So there's 2 options. One is the Annunciation of Gabriel coming to Mary, and the other is the visitation of Mary going to visit Elizabeth, and this proclamation, as Mary came to see Juan Diego, Mary goes to visit Elizabeth. But that passage ends with Mary saying, my soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. And it ends there. And I've always thought if there was a feast that called for the Magnificat, Mary continuing on, my soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior, for he has looked upon his lowly servant, etc. That just seems, it's such a proclamation of empowerment, of turning tables upside down. That should be the gospel we hear on this feast. But
you'll have to speak to the liturgists. But do you think that might be part of this? My proclaims the I am the servant of the Lord. You people go out and you also continue your journey as servants of the Lord.
Right. That's what I think that would be the passage to have. Yeah. But they didn't ask me. Maybe someday when they
I have to tell you a funny story. Just 2 weeks ago, the little kids that I work with, we're going to have them sing the villancicos, or those are the Christmas stories. And there was one little boy singing all his heart out, but he was naughty. So I said, "You come and stand beside me." So he stood beside me, and the woman who was helping us playing the guitar wanted the kids to sing the verse as well as the chorus. He was belting out. So she said to him, "Do you read?" "Yeah, he does." So she passed out the papers, and he continued to sing, but he was standing beside me. And I looked down at one point, and he was holding the paper upside down. But he was singing anyway with all his heart and soul. And then after a while, he looked at me, and obviously I didn't know the verses. I don't know their Christmas song. So he moved closer to me and began following along with his finger, so that where they were singing, that I would join them and sing as well. So the little boy that had to stand beside me turned the paper right side up and pulled me along with the words in this.
Good. He brought you into the project. Cool.
Right.
Cool. Sister Judy Kramer, thank you very much for talking with me. I want to conclude our conversation with the prayer for Mass from the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. O God, Father of mercies, you placed your people under the singular protection of your Son's most holy mother. Grant that all who invoke the Blessed Virgin of Guadalupe may seek with ever more lively faith the progress of peoples in the ways of justice and of peace. We pray through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Thank you, Tom. This has been a pleasure to talk with you about this. And may your people be blessed with a greater knowledge of what the message of Guadalupe and the Virgin of Guadalupe.
I hope
Bless your
so.
heart. Thank you.